What is happening, everybody? It's time for Stokastic MMA Live Before Lock. We are sponsored by Prize Picks today. No more Jason Floyd. Well, I should reword that. No Jason Floyd this week. He's gone. He's too cool for us. He's out. He's with the Buccaneers. Tom Brady's doing the Masked Singer, whatever is going on with him. So I'm filling in once again. But I think first time ever that Pete and I have gotten to do shows back to back together, build a little rapport, get some stuff going. Mm-hmm. So Pete, last week's slate, it wasn't a terrible one. I didn't profit, but generally, if I don't profit in MMA, I totally get my ass kicked. That wasn't the case last week, just kind of gave into the rake. What do you recall about last week's slate? Like, what do you feel like we missed on and what did we hit on?
Well, I will tell you last week was crazy, right? And I think David Onama ruined a ton of lineups for people. He looked great early. The Priscilla Cachoeira helped me out a lot, in addition to taking some dart shots, some dart throws with Tyson Nam. That helped me out. But Bruno Silva, having massive exposure to him dropping the ball in that situation was just crazy. And we were kind of talking about it off air. It's just like of everything that happened last week, I would have to say that is the most surprising of, outcomes. And just from minute one to the end of the fight, it was just crazy to me.
Bruno Silva was, if I remember correctly, 37% owned in the big contest on DraftKings. Mearshart was 13%. I might not have the exact numbers correct, but I'm in the right ballpark. So everybody kind of had the same expectation for that fight. And it could not have gone more different than I expect. Like, I know MMA always has wide ranges of outcomes, and we're talking about handicapping fights and how we break them down. I'm trying to think like, all right, what is the upside of individual fighters if everything goes right for them? What happens if it goes wrong? There was no scenario where I thought Mearshart would just straight up outstrike Bruno Silva. And Bruno Silva had like 2 minutes of cardio, and then he was done for the day and was like, all right, now we're just hanging in until I got finished. So yeah, that was the number one thing that shocked me the most last week. Other things were at least within the realm of outcomes. That was not something I saw coming at all.
Yeah. I mean, we can always chalk up fluke knockouts or just somebody getting caught. No problem at all. Like, you slip on the mat, you get caught in a guillotine, something stupid could happen. But as far as getting outskilled, that was not what I had projected at all. And that's why, you have to account for it with your lineups. And I did not do so last week with Mearshart, but Tyson Nam really came through for me, and my exposure kind of elevated in combination with Priscilla Cachoeira. So those two together helped me out, and ended up being a decent week, more so a profitable betting week and solid DFS week. But looking to take down one of these tournaments this week with you, Greg, and everybody that's listening to us here at Stokastic. And I can't wait, man. But we'll have to see what, everybody a part of Stokastic has for questions, and see where our exposure lies.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, throw them into the Discord chat. I'll be answering. I see that Woody has noticed that new guy doing the show today, me, Woody, who I usually hang out in Discord during some of the MMA cards when I don't have other plans or whatever. We sit in there, chop it up, sweat, all that together. But last week we did have Neil Orfield, ended up coming in second in the big contest, took home $30K. And he was asking us questions about what he should do about his lineups. Right before we got into lock, he was sitting there. He's like, who should I have in my player pool? He's like, should I include Angela Hill? And we're giving him some other high upside underdogs to get to. So yeah, he was actually, here's where he kind of got screwed. He would have came in first if Chito Vera was given all 4 of his knockdowns, but he was only scored with 3. I thought he knocked down Cruz 4 times, but Fight Metric only scored him with 3. So Chito wasn't on the optimal lineup. If he got in the 4th knockdown scored for him, it would have been Neil in first place. But 30K ain't too shabby, and hoping for some more big wins on this slate as well. If you guys want access to all the tools that we have over at Stokastic.com, not just for MMA, but for basically every single other DFS sport out there. We've got NFL starting up soon. NBA won't be far behind. MLB is also underway. You want to sign up right now using the promo code MMALBL. That'll get you 50% off your first week of a Stokastic Plus package. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Stokastic Plus today. So I think where we have to start is going to be with the main event, Kamaru Usman against Leon Edwards. And I'm curious, realistically, what odds do you give Leon to win this fight? Because I do find it hard to see a realistic path for him.
I mean, it's kind of hard because where I hold Kamaru Usman in regards to MMA as a whole, I think that he's one of the best pound for pound fighters out there. So you're not really going to be catching me picking against him. I understand how volatile MMA can be at times and how much variance there is within the sport, but I would probably say 80% of the time, Kamaru Usman should walk away, especially if he's on that pound for pound ranking. The one thing that is a little bit concerning is Kamaru Usman coming off hand surgery. So having to sit on the sidelines for a little bit. I know he knows how to train. It just comes down to, is his health at 100%? We know that he's going to come in prepared. But I do think that they're both, different fighters than when they first fought. And I think that they have developed. Usman relied on his wrestling heavily in their first encounter. I don't think he needs to do that. I think he can outstrike Edwards for portions of the fight and mixing in takedowns whenever he chooses to, if it's a close round. So for me, I'd probably say 80% of the time, 75% of the time, Usman wins this. I think the odds for one of the best fighters out there is I'm getting to Usman quite a bit today.
Yeah, same. And the other thing too about the Leon Edwards side, and also for my standpoint on this fight, for Usman to lose, I think, well, other than a fluke event happening, he gets caught by a head kick or there's an injury or something. In terms of just the fights, how he would lose, I think it would have to be just a sudden decline for Usman from this standpoint. He's 35 years old. You mentioned long time on the sidelines with the hand injury. There's going to be a point in time where age catches up to everybody. It's hard to predict that to ever come. But the other thing that makes me not really love this spot for Edwards, particularly from a DFS perspective, is I just think Usman's a better fighter everywhere. I think that there's a chance Usman could even outstrike Leon Edwards based on what we've seen out of Usman as of late. And Leon Edwards, to go up against a better fighter, you kind of have to increase variance to win something like that, right? Think like an NBA game where you have to hit more threes than the other team, like really up the variance. And Edwards is such a conservative fighter. Like you look at some of the other recent fights he's had where he's really been a much stronger opponent than his opposition. The Nate Diaz fight, RDA, Gunnar Nelson, Donald Cerrone. He went 5 rounds with Cerrone. I felt he could have finished that fight whenever he wanted to, and he just kind of didn't. And that's the concern with me for Edwards, is I think to really beat a better fighter, you have to take chances and you have to do something that's like really high risk and really high reward. And I just don't really see that as being something in Edwards' arsenal, right? He's got a really well-rounded game. He strikes at, decent, but not super high pace, but he just doesn't put people away. And if it's just going to be him fighting Usman minute for minute, it's hard for me to see a path where Edwards number 1 wins. And then number 2, let's say he fends off the takedowns, maybe wins 3 rounds to 2. I don't know how well that would score for DraftKings.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm completely with you. As far as like, if you're not a prolific finisher, how are you going to beat somebody who's so well-rounded in Kamaru Usman? If you wanted to knock Usman, it's his lack of submission finishes, right? Like if he could, develop his game to have better submissions, I think that he would be truly unstoppable, but he doesn't need to, because he can pound you out. He can outstrike you. He can just, lay on top of you at times, stall out whenever he needs to. I cannot project Edwards to be the better minute winner over 25 minutes. And we know that his finishing likelihood is minimal, just because of, if you go and you look back on his career, he's not the best finisher. And there's plenty of, potential matchups where he could have finished his opponents. Just like you said, Cowboy, my friend, like if you're telling me he's going to finish Kamaru Usman, who is, not chinny at times, but it does seem like he gets touched up on the feet every now and then. Gilbert Burns hurt him. Even Colby Covington did. But I think that's because of the what else they bring to the table, how they can mix things up so well. So in my head, I was trying to like talk myself into playing Edwards because his price is so enticing. I'm like, all right, let's give him 2 rounds. And it comes down to the third, the 5th round. And then Usman, in my head, will still pick up the win. How does he really score? I don't really see how he scores even at 7,100 that well.
Yeah, so that's what it is for me, where I think for Edwards to win is a big ask, and then for him to land on an optimal lineup probably has to be a 1st or 2nd round finish, because there's going to be clinching in this fight. At some point, he's going to be taken down by Usman. We saw them fight before. Usman took him down 6 times. That was in a 3-round fight. And I said different guys than they were before. And I agree. I do happen to think Usman has made bigger strides than Edwards has made since then, which isn't really a knock on Edwards, who's improved more than Kamaru Usman over the last few years. But the other thing too, when it comes to Edwards, is at some point, if he's going to be taken down, there's going to be individual rounds where he just doesn't score any fantasy points. So I think he's pretty reliant on an early 1st or 2nd round finish to be on an optimal lineup for DK purposes, because there are a lot of underdogs today that I think are really risky. I see we have some super chats coming in that we're going to answer in a second. But the problem is with all these high variance fights on the low end, some of them, like whether it's, Luke Rockhold, Marcin Tybura, Leonardo Santos, I think at some point, a couple or one or two of these underdogs are going to win. And the ones that do are going to score well. And I don't really view Edwards as being a high scorer if he wins in most scenarios.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we have some people in chat saying if Leon wins, he'll be, that'll be enough in itself to make him into the optimal lineup. It could, just because it allows you a ton of roster flexibility within the other salaries. I just don't know how he wins a decision 3 rounds. I just don't see it. I really don't see it. When you get rocked by Nate Diaz on the feet, you're going to, like I can say Colby Covington rocked Usman. I can say, I can, say that Gilbert Burns rocked Usman, but Nate Diaz rocking you on the feet is a little concerning for me. And I wouldn't put out the potential for an Usman finish, to be honest.
Yeah. And then a few other things also. I mean, I thought part of it was Leon looked tired at the end of the Nate Diaz fight. And it's not like his output was crazy in that fight. 4 takedowns, right. 77 significant strikes. The fight against Gunnar Nelson a couple years ago, I thought he looked fairly miserable in that fight. It was a split decision. He ended up winning, but it was a 3rd round that I thought Gunnar Nelson won. Edwards was gassed by the time the 3rd round came around. And then also, if we do go back to the 1st round, I thought the first fight between Edwards and Usman, I thought Edwards won the 1st round. And then what happens after that is he just got worn down by the wrestling. So in the 1st round, at least the first couple takedown attempts, Edwards stuffs them. The 3rd one, Usman lands. And by the time you get to the 3rd round of that fight, Usman's taking him down at will because Edwards just doesn't have the energy to wrestle defensively anymore. So I do worry about Edwards' gas tank once we get into the 3rd round and later. So to me, for Edwards to be optimal lineup, it's a 1st or 2nd round finish, which is a pretty low probability outcome. I'd handicap it in the neighborhood of like 12 to 15%. Outside of that, I don't really see a path to optimal for him. Whereas Usman, on the other hand, if he wins, almost certainly going to be optimal, whether it's high striking output on the feet, the takedowns, just everything we've seen, the well-grounded game from Usman, the pressure he fights with. I think he's pretty likely to score extremely well in a win.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his box score, it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that he has to be the best DFS scorer out there, at least the most consistent, because he has hit 100 points in almost every outing. Obviously, the Damian Maia fight where you want nothing to do with Damian Maia on the mat. So it was a ton of defending the takedowns, 15 takedowns defended against Damian Maia, just keep it on the feet and butcher him. So Kamaru Usman, I'm always going to be getting to him for a DFS, lineup, and I like him again today.
All right, so let's start hitting on some of these super chats, and the next one, good timing because it's about the co-main event, and that's the next fight I wanted to talk about anyway. Liker is saying, I have a lot of Rockhold today because I believe he's the more skilled fighter. I agree. Costa seems like a mindless brute to me. I also agree with that. What are your guys' thoughts? So I think that this is a very high upside fight. Like whoever wins, pretty likely to land in the optimal lineup here. If Luke wins, it's almost going to have to be via wrestling and grappling, where I think he has a massive advantage over Paulo Costa. The problem is Costa might actually kill him on the feet before it gets there. And before we started the show, Pete and I were talking about the chin of Luke Rockhold, the durability. And to me, the biggest issue with Luke Rockhold, even beyond like, does he have questionable durability? Yeah, probably. Although his knockouts, a lot of them, it's like, who isn't going to get knocked out by the shot that Jan Blachowicz hit him with? Who isn't going to get knocked out by that spinning wheel kick that Vitor Belfort hit him with? Yoel Romero knocked him out. Okay, that happens. The one bad knockout is the Bisping one. But beyond that, he is extremely defensively irresponsible. He constantly has his hands down. He throws strikes. He doesn't get out of the pocket. He leaves his chin up. So it is there to be hit, which is what happened against Michael Bisping. He gave zero regard for Michael Bisping's ability. He went in there thinking he'd already won the fight, which he had also said in the press conference leading up to that. And if Luke Rockhold is going to carry that kind of game plan against Paulo Costa, he is going to die. Like he's going to get put to sleep, and it's going to look bad for him. The thing is, if he could close the distance without getting put out, and he's able to put hands on Paulo Costa, I don't think Costa has the best takedown defense. We've seen him taken down multiple times in the UFC, and Luke Rockhold has a very underrated ground game. If Luke Rockhold gets on top of Paulo Costa, I think that's probably going to be a wrap for the fight. So I actually do have a bet on Luke Rockhold, 10-1 to win by submission. Obviously, do I think that's a lock? No, it's a 10-1 bet. But I think if these guys fight 10 times, I think Rockhold probably submits him twice or something like that. So that's why I think 10-1 is a viable bet there. Paulo Costa is far more likely to win the fight. But I do think Luke Rockhold is a good play in large field GPPs because I see a path to victory, and that path to victory scores very well on DK. But Pete, how are you handling this fight?
Yeah, I mean, great points, Greg. On stokastic.fantasycruncher.com, I would recommend making a group getting to this fight. It's really hard for me to avoid this fight. I just view it as an optimal fight where the winner is going to score well, because I think it's going to be the pace and the pressure of both of them. You have the inactivity and layoff that Luke Rockhold is looking to, overcome, get back in the cage. And I mean, it's a difficult fight to just kind of hop right back into the cage. You're facing Paulo Costa. And as far as a skill standpoint, I think Luke Rockhold has all the skills to create a complete game plan to beat the likes of Paulo Costa. It's just that compounding damage that he has taken over the course of his career. The layoff could have worked and it could have helped him. But I still think that, once you've been knocked out so many times, you only have X amount of times that you can absorb a shot before you get put out again. Like we were joking, it's not like Jason Witt, but I do think that Rockhold can get, rocked on the feet. And, from an exposure standpoint, I'm overly aggressive to Paulo Costa today just because of how I foresee the fight going. But from a fight film perspective, Luke Rockhold really is dangerous, and not even just the grappling. Like, he's a dangerous striker. He will lure his opponents in, and as they do, he hits them with a beautiful right check hook. And I actually think that he can catch Paulo Costa, because Paulo Costa's working towards, blitzing forward with a crazy barrage. There's three things I worry about for Paulo Costa: running into that check hook, that beautiful left kick that Rockhold has where he can bury to the body. If he buries it to the body or to the head, he could either knock him out, or he can keep that right hand at bay and make Paulo Costa just protect himself, which kind of limits his weapons. And then the third option is the grappling, right? Where I would suspect Luke Rockhold to have a significant edge. So from an ownership standpoint, I think that the masses are going to be flocking towards Paulo Costa. And I don't hate Luke Rockhold from an underdog standpoint at all. Just for me personally, I'm overweight to Paulo Costa. But if I was viewing this on paper, as some of the sharps will be, you need to get some exposure to Luke Rockhold. He's one of the best live underdogs on the slate.
Yeah. And to me, it's not just like, because to favor anybody other than Paulo Costa this matchup, I think is crazy. I certainly favor Costa to win. I'm overweight to the fight on a whole. I'm going to be overweight to the Costa side. I'm going to be overweight to the Rockhold side, just because I think whoever wins the fight scores really well, which is what I like about Luke Rockhold. Something else to point out too is because we were being asked, about Leon Edwards before we were breaking that down. Edwards and Rockhold have the same exact money line odds this week. These fights are lined pretty much identically, but I feel pretty confident that Rockhold outscores Edwards if both of them win, right?
Yep.
I think the ceiling for him is higher in a win. Yet, if you look at the current ownership projections we have, Edwards is projected to be far more popular. I do think there's a little bit more of a floor for Edwards. So for cash games, yeah, certainly Edwards over Rockhold. For tournaments, though, it's Rockhold for me over Edwards, because I care more about the upside in tournaments than floor. Who cares if I come in the 50th percentile of the field or the first percentile? If I have a lineup in the middle or a lineup in last place, it's the exact same result. It doesn't cash. I'm only looking for the upside. So for tournaments, that's why I gravitate towards Luke Rockhold. Everybody in chat who says his chin might be dust, yeah, totally agree. He might have zero durability, but the chance he wins is why I think that, or at least his path to victory is why I think he's good for tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just the 5-round nature is going to allure a lot of people to the underdog in the 5-round main event, as evidenced by our ownership. But as far as like a likelihood to beat somebody, I mean, I give Luke Rockhold much more of a chance to beat Paulo Costa than I do Leon Edwards to beat Kamaru Usman. You're talking about Usman is on the pound for pound rankings, one of the best fighters we have ever seen. And then we have Paulo Costa, who we know has difficulty cutting weight. He is sometimes, I shouldn't say chinny, but he can get clipped and hurt. And if he's put on his back in a wrestling or jiu-jitsu situation, Rockhold's going to have the advantage. So that's an easy call for me. It's Rockhold over Leon Edwards all day long.
Yeah. And by the way, the pick to win the fight outright, it's still Paulo Costa.
Yes.
For tournaments, though, I think it's one to play both sides. I don't feel that way about every single fight. Next super chat from Corey Randall. Pete, I know y'all don't like stacking, but if you had to pick one fight, would you agree it would be the Aldo fight? I'm going to answer for you, and the answer is unequivocally no, but you could give your answer no as well as to why.
Yeah, I say no. Just because I don't foresee that having both fighters score well. Merab gives you tremendous takedown floor, but he's also going up against one of the best takedown defensive artists out there in Jose Aldo. So I suspect he's either going to get takedowns plentifully or he's not going to get any. And I think that's only going to result in one of the fighters. And I would not stack that fight. I was trying to convince myself to stack the main event. But again, I stumble upon the same situation. I am struggling with trying to, give Edwards 2-3 rounds and where they both pay off. I just don't see it unless we have like a crazy fight, like a Yuri Prochazka, Glover Teixeira type of fight. I'm not projecting that's going to happen. It could, but I think it's going to be mostly in Usman's favor tonight.
Yeah, I'm seeing that the same way. And we have a super chat here from CS111. So the coach leaving us a super chat. Greg and Pete, what up? Thank you for NAM last week. Same question out of 13 in the 555 on DK. How many Usman lineups? How many Edwards lineups? How many of neither? And do you stack one? At the moment, thinking of locking Usman. Thanks, Coach S. So based on my current exposures, that would be 11 of Usman, 1 of Edwards, wow, and 1 with neither.
Okay. Well, I am more in the 7 or 8 ballpark of Usman, and I really like him. It's just of how many beautiful 9,000 options there are. Obviously, the 5-round nature makes Usman probably the safest out of everybody. So I don't hate your call and your stance on it. It's just there are some really enticing night. We lost Miranda Maverick, who I actually thought would score really, really well too. But you got Romanov, Albazi, and Pedro.
I had a bet on Maverick to win by submission, as Tyler knows, because I recorded my video and then she got scratched from the fight. And so I was like, can you re-record? I'm doing a baseball show at the time. It's like, I've got too many things to go on. I can't re-record yet. But yeah, I was really bummed out by that. That was my favorite leverage play on the slate. Was getting to Maverick over some of the high-end fighters because she wasn't expected to be popular. And I thought she had the same upside as Usman and Romanov and all the other fighters up top. So that was a bummer.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. And I was going to be overexposed to her because naturally women's MMA, you can get an edge. A lot of people don't want the headache because sometimes it's volatile. So 13 lineups. Originally, I just said 7 or 8, right? I actually think I might be agreeing with Greg. I'm more in like the 9 or 10 range where I would not stack.
No stack.
Maybe even, I don't know, 1. I'd probably say no, CS. I'm just going to stick to my guns and say 9 or 10 with Usman.
And then let's get back to talking about the Merab Aldo fight, because I found the dynamics of that one really interesting, because we know how Merab wins fights. And when he does, typically for DraftKings, he scores really well. I know people are going to want to point to the one fight, because I saw somebody bring it up in the chat, the one fight he had against John Dodson, where he was only able to take him down twice. Although with that said, I thought that they could have given him a few more takedowns. Like they weren't giving him the mat returns in that fight. I think I remember him having 1 or 2 trips against Dodson that could have been scored as takedowns. It just weren't. So I didn't think the score is a little bit suspect there, but listen to the other scores. We read off the box scores for Merab. 163 against Marlon Moraes, 108 against Cody Stamann, the 74 against Dodson, 148 against Gustavo Lopez, 136 against Casey Kenny, 124 against Brad Katona, 129 against Terrion Ware, 75 against Ricky Simon. That was a loss, by the way. So Merab has some of the highest upside of anybody currently in all of MMA DFS. Here's the rub, though. He does it with immense amount of pressure, takedowns, and doesn't hold top control. So got to just bounce back up. He doesn't care, sticks on him, lands some strikes, takes him down again, trips, mat returns. But Jose Aldo was some of the best defensive wrestling in MMA history, 90% takedown defense. And also that was done at a higher weight class. So now we're looking at Jose Aldo and the dynamics of this matchup against Merab. I've really struggled to know what to do about this fight because on one hand, Merab typically scores really, really well and wins. But what does this fight look like if Jose Aldo's takedown defense and his cardio holds up against Merab? Does he hurt him and finish him on the feet? Moraes came pretty close to doing that. Or is it just a case where Merab isn't able to take him down and it's kind of a low output decision that ends up playing out on the feet? How are you handling this fight? I think it's the one that I'm the most uncertain about.
Yeah, I'm having some internal conflict. Truthfully, I really am, because I fought in the same promotion as Merab Dvalishvili, and I can't see somebody just dominating Jose Aldo, the GOAT. And if it happens, it happens. But that's my little internal conflict where I'm like, man, I fought alongside this guy. And now you're talking about fighting Jose Aldo, who has possibly fallen from greatness. But the issue is that the takedown defense and the springboard ability that Aldo has back to his feet, where the lack of control could lead to more fantasy points. But I also think that it could lead to those iffy takedowns. We've seen Fight Metric or whoever does the scoring where it's like, man, I don't know what they're not seeing, whether it's knockdowns or takedowns. Scoring's a little inconsistent at times. I think one of the most contrarian things for this entire slate, and I accounted for it with some of my lineups, and I don't know how crazy it is. I feel like it's pretty crazy. It's avoiding this fight. It's at that sweet spot where everybody wants to put it in their lineup. What happens if Merab does get some takedowns? Jose Aldo adjusts, and this turns into a striking matchup, but Aldo doesn't find the finish. I think Aldo in the decision doesn't really score that well. I think the likelihood of that is decently low just because we've seen Merab get rocked by Marlon Moraes, and I actually hold Aldo striking in such high regard. So for portions of my lineups, I avoided the fight just because it's so close and it's tough to see engage because Merab's wrestling and his mat return ability is exceptional. It's just I did not like that striking defensive skills that we saw in his previous matchup.
I don't know how he survived against Moraes. Like that was, he was dead twice in the first round. He gets knocked down and then it looks to me like he's unconscious. And all of a sudden, like the Undertaker rising up or Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder, it's like here pops up Merab and he just becomes the Terminator and hunts down just poor Marlon Moraes. It's like, you know, that was the last bit of energy Moraes really had in his career. He left everything out that he had left in that first round. Then, you know, he comes out, his next fight gets finished fairly quickly by Song Yadong and he retired. But yeah, Moraes really did look good in the first part of that first round. So I look at this fight. I'm underweight to both sides right now. Merab is crazy popular. Like he's expected to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40% owned. And then you got Jose Aldo project for mid 20% ownership. There's a path to upside for both of them. Merab, if he gets his wrestling game going, and then Aldo, if he's just able to finish the job that Moraes wasn't able to. But I think the field is a little bit too high on both sides of the fight just because the ownership is so high.
My man, I love it when Greg, one of the smartest DFS players out there, kind of agrees with me. And I'm like, just trying to navigate through the slate, seeing what the masses are doing. And like, yeah, is there potential of massive scoring? Yeah, but I'm not going to go over the field because I am torn on the fight. So I'm kind of pivoting elsewhere. I think that a couple spots higher or lower are always forgotten, you know, around that 8,200, 8,000 range anyway. So I'm happy to hear you saying that. And I can't wait to see how it works out, guys. We got 400 people checking us out right now for UFC 278, Usman versus Edwards 2. If you guys could do us a favor, hit that like button, get us to 278 likes. We would really appreciate that.
Yeah. The exact number for UFC 278.
I would love that.
Kamaru Usman, Leon Edwards, second time they are fighting. Also, shout out to PrizePicks, the sponsor of today's show. If you guys haven't signed up at PrizePicks yet, use the promo code AWESOME. Not a mistake. I know we changed the name of the site. Some of the promo codes haven't changed over. I like to reiterate that because I don't want anybody to think I made any kind of mistake. So use the promo code AWESOME and you get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit over at PrizePicks. We've got great tools over at Stokastic.com that are going to help you build some player prop cards over at PrizePicks. So if you go on over to OddsShopper, you're looking at when MLB games, or if you're looking at when NFL gets going or NBA, we've got all the player props up there, projected odds of them hitting the overs or the unders, really useful for building those prop cards over at PrizePicks. And when it comes to signing up, you got a couple of choices. You can either sign up and get no free money, or you sign up using the promo code AWESOME and get up to $100 bonus. Why not take the free money? Sign up using the promo code AWESOME. All right, so let's go on and talk about the rest of this card. And just in general, I want to talk about the high-end fighters that we've not yet brought up. Usman is by far the highest priority for me, but we've got another group of really high upside fighters. And I guess we could include Costa in the mix as well. We'll go everybody 8,700 and above. So Costa, Woodson, Gordon, Romanov, Usman, Albazi, and Tyson Pedro. I'm curious, who are you prioritizing the most out of this group? And I guess if it's Usman, you can just say Usman. We'll say who the second highest priority is.
It is actually Paulo Costa. I told you if Costa loses today, my ship is sinking. But that's kind of like not the flag. I mean, I guess it is for most of my lineups. It's just how I think the fight is going to go. And there was a time where that 8,700 fighter has made it into the optimal lineup about 55, 60% of the time. So I like the fight. I think it's an optimal fight and I'm favoring him. So second is Kamaru Usman though.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, Usman is number one. Also, I think there's a lot of safety comes to it. Like, I don't see a path where he wins and doesn't score well. Mm-hmm. Costa almost certainly scores well in a win. The only way I would see him winning by finish and not is if the Rockhold fight against Costa looks like the Rockhold fight against Jan, where Rockhold is able to hold him up against the cage for the first round. Not that much happened. Second round starts and boom, look, Rockhold is dead. And then it's like, oh, cool. But really all that Jan had in that fight, it was like a few strikes to knock down the second round finish. And I do think there's a lot of high upside fighters at the high end. To me, I'm really curious what you think about the Tyson Pedro fight, because Hunsucker is the definition of a jobber, right? A guy who's in here to do a job, and that job is to lose. He is in there to put Tyson Pedro over. And it's clear for whatever reason, the UFC is really investing in Tyson Pedro. Maybe it's because he's friends with Tai Tuivasa. But he comes back from a long layoff. They give him Ike Villanueva. And Ike Villanueva, I think, is better competition than Hunsucker. Like, I don't know how Hunsucker is still in the UFC. Like, if he was a little bit better, he wouldn't have a job because he'd be a threat to win fights. Correct. That's not really the case here. But the one thing that does concern me a little bit about Tyson Pedro, he is so low output. So even that fight against Ike Villanueva, if you remember, he got that finish with 5 seconds left in the first round. Total bust on that slate if it doesn't happen. So I have to very heavily favor Tyson Pedro in the fight. I do worry a little bit about, number one, the price tag. And then number two, what happens if he doesn't get the quick finish? Like, does this become a thing where he finishes him in the second round and scores 85 fantasy points? So I'm finding it a little difficult to get all the way up to Tyson Pedro. Like, I want to get exposure to him for sure, but I'm underweight to the field relative to his current ownership. Do you have any of those same concerns that I do about Pedro?
Yeah, I do. I mean, outside the 60-second bonus, I think the 9,500 fighter is extremely safe, but it limits your lineups. And if you don't get a dominant first round, you essentially bust. All those lineups bust unless you have a prolific takedown artist. Now, we could see Tyson Pedro go to the takedown well. I think he has multiple paths to victory, and I think Hunsucker is going to be aggressive early coming down in weight class. He throws with reckless abandon and he likes to close the gap and push you. I think his recklessness will lead to him getting finished, whether it's Pedro changing levels and putting him on his back en route to a submission or TKO finish, or just getting caught on the feet. Now, the output and the calculated approach that Pedro, fights with is where I'm somewhat pivoting for most of my lineups, just because, yes, he's a great play. He's a safe play. I put him up there for safety right next to Usman. It's just like the salary, you could get away from it and have some other fighters kind of, exceed that DFS score. I actually think that for a guy that's been away from the cage a little bit, right? And this is me as a coach talking. If my fighter stepped away in 2018, we get him a fight in 2022, it's a quick first round finish. You don't want to drag the fight out, but you're not going to be so urgent to go out there and get it done quickly. You want minutes. You want to be acclimated. So I think patience is key, and we could see a second round finish just not result in an optimal score. So I am relatively underweight to the field. I think the field is kind of crazy with that ownership that we're looking at. So yeah, I'm underweight to it. I'm expecting a safe win, a dominant win, but there's some other 9,000 options that we love this week. How could you not? Romanov, Usman, Albazi,
Which one scares you the most on the high end? If you had to pick one fighter on the high end who, and by the way, all these fighters are massive favorites, and rightfully so. I don't think any of them are likely to lose. But with that said, I do think on the aggregate, one or two of them are likely to lose just based on the odds. All of the underdogs, if you're using just sportsbook odds as a reference point, all these underdogs with the Hunsucker is only like a 10% outcome of winning, like 10 to 15%. But all the other ones are in the neighborhood of 20 to 25% when you look at, fighters like Marcin Tybura or Leonardo Santos, Luke Rockhold. Sportsbooks all give these guys a realistic chance to win. So with that in mind, I do think one or two of them are going to come through, which is why I'm kind of mixing and matching some of them in your lineups into my lineups. but which one are you most concerned about?
I want to see if you agree with me. Okay. And I'm the biggest backer in the world. Who do you think?
So we're on the same page. We're on the same page. I already know what you're going to say. So you and I are both concerned about Romanov then.
Yes, I am. I am, from just like an unknown, right? Yeah. Anytime you see an undefeated fighter, it's great until they're actually met with their adversary that can push them. We saw Juan Espino do that to a degree, but Juan Espino has better wrestling than Marcin Tybura. Marcin Tybura has excellent grappling though, which I think could counter some of Romanov's attempts. Not to mention he's a massive guy. And if he's just going to be present and not get finished early because he's stubborn, you could see, a come from behind victory where Marcin on the feet probably has the edge over Romanov, especially when he was younger. He had good kickboxing. I love my guy Romanov. I think takedowns into ground and pound is, his best path to victory. I worry about his cardio, and I do worry about his cardio when he's unable to get the finish. And kind of like when Jack Shore fought Ricky Simon, you have an equivalent adversary where they can push you, and they, it's kind of like a mirror match, and it's like, oh man, this guy's not going away. And then next thing you see an upset come, and very, very rarely do you have fighters go undefeated for such a long time in the sport of MMA. So I'm getting plenty of exposure to Marcin Tybura because at the end of the day, it's heavyweight MMA. We
have seen very minimal resistance against Romanov to this point in his career. His wins, Roque Martinez, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, Jared Vandera, Chase Sherman, those were all walkovers. Yes. The only decent opponent he fought was Juan Espino, and that was a really weird fight. Really weird fight. It's competitive in the third round. There's a groin strike. It goes to the judges' scorecards midway through the third round. It ends up being a split decision win for Romanov. And I think that Tybura is better than Juan Espino. So I still have to pick Romanov as being the more likely winner of this fight. But if it gets into the third round, it could get sketchy. So I do think Tybura is a really high upside underdog at 7,200. He's in the same bag as me with somebody like a Luke Rockhold, where it's like, does he win? Probably not. But if he does win, I think it scores pretty well. And I do think the line is a little bit too wide with Tybura about a 3-1 underdog right now, because he's faced much better competition than Romanov has. And that's not the end all be all, but still, I mean, he's battle tested. He's fought some good opponents and beat them. I just don't know what Romanov is yet. And there have been times we've seen him fight and he didn't really react well to leg kicks at times. He doesn't always look fluid on the feet. So I think that Tybura is one of the better underdogs to target this weekend. I am with you. And I have to shout out Scott Mariani for his comment. He says, no heavyweight fighter will ever go undefeated. I actually agree with that. Like, I don't know about ever, but I think it's a pretty solid statement for the majority. It's like, it's such a volatile division. There's so much variance. Big guys swinging little gloves. You talk about cardio, one of the most likely divisions to gas out. So there's so many factors, and it's good for certain fighters to get this experience, get this L out of the way. I'm projecting Romanov to still get it done, but as far as underdogs on the slate, there's weeks where we love the underdogs. I think that Tybura is going a little bit disrespected though. Yeah, totally agree. I think the line is a little bit too wide. And then I think Tybura is live for DFS, and we don't have him projected for that much ownership right now. And, it's hard to find any of these underdogs that are really confident in. That's why I said I'm mixing and matching the ones that if they do win, I think have the most upside, and Tybura falls into that camp. The other one that I think is similar is Leonardo Santos versus Jared Gordon, because I think this fight is very likely to finish inside the distance. Last I looked, it was like minus 215 to end inside the distance. And it is either Santos wins in the first round or he totally gasses, falls off a cliff, and then Jared Gordon just beats the shit out of him in the second and third round and takes over, which is kind of like if you watch Santos's last fight, he's taking on Clay Guida. He beat it totally, pillared every aspect of the game. He beats up Clay Guida in the first round, drops him, looks like he's on his way to a massive, massive fantasy score. Guida's just able to hold on and survive. And what happens in the second round? Santos has nothing left. He is gassed. And that is only in the second round. He is now 42 years old. He's taking on a cardio machine in Jared Gordon, who also has some questionable durability. And this fight is at altitude. So Santos is either going to win early and score a bunch of fantasy points, or I think Gordon is going to score a bunch of fantasy points winning in the second or third round. Because if you look at some of Gordon's recent wins, the fight against Selecki was a competitive one and went back and forth. Other than that, 95 against Danny Chavez, 120 against Chris Fishgold, 111 against Dan Moret. So there's high upside in Jared Gordon. Another fight where I think the winner should score really well. And there's a live underdog in this fight. So another fight that I'm targeting pretty heavily is Leonardo Santos Old man, 42 years old. It's a weird card. We're talking about like weird high variance heavyweight fights and a 42-year-old lightweight in there, but he's also going to be a lot bigger than Jared Gordon. Gordon, who's naturally a featherweight, but just wasn't able to make the weight consistently, so they made him move up to lightweight. So I think it's first round finish or bust for Santos, but I think he's one of the live underdogs.
Yeah, shout out to my boy Jared Gordon, my roommate when I stayed at Cowboys Ranch. So obviously I'm rooting big for Jared Gordon. And I think his pace and his well-rounded skill set can do enough the longer this fight goes. He has to be very, very careful early on because Leonardo Santos hits extremely hard and the durability of Gordon is always in question, right? Like when he loses, he gets finished. And that chin and his stance just in general, his head is there to be hit at times. He has improved and we have seen him develop over the years. But outside of round one, I really like his chances. So I will be live betting this, especially because I think that if Santos has a great round one and Gordon can survive, I think it's going to be beautiful work for Gordon going forward. As far as DFS goes, I have to tell you that Santos is one of the most exposed underdogs just because of his round one potential. Obviously, I'm just targeting this fight a lot in general. I think the pace, I could see Santos breaking again. He broke against Clay Guida, and you brought up elevation, and I kind of just completely forgot about that. Like, oh my God, does Santos even have a round of cardio now? Like he might not, but what he does have is exceptional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, even though at times he'll accept positions, and he has dangerous punching power. So I think this fight scores well. I'm hoping for the best for Jared Gordon, but as far as like underdogs on the slate in an ugly week, I'm kind of like the 7,200 range and up. Tybura is fine. Santos is fine. A couple other fighters we'll get to, but I'm definitely okay with getting exposure to Santos.
Yeah, we've got 1.6 just asked us. He said, fight taking place in Utah. Who is the best/worst cardio and who will be impacted the most by elevation? We just talked about him. I think it's Santos. Yeah. Like he already has shit for cardio. Like we saw him gas out in the second round against Clay Guida in his last fight. So, and part of it is just age, right? So it's not fair for me to just come out and attack him for having bad cardio. He's 42 years old. Most professional fighters are not 42. That plays a big factor, but yeah,
it's fair though. It's fair though, Greg. It is fair though. I mean, at the end of the day, like you're preparing for a fight, he should be putting in the work in the training room. Skills usually diminish. Cardio shouldn't. You know what I mean? Like cardio necessarily shouldn't over age. I don't know. I know some old guys that have tremendous cardio. So Leo Santos, what the hell are you doing in the gym?
Yeah, it was ugly in his last fight. Now we're fighting in altitude as well. So that was part of the question. The other one is who has the best cardio on the card? I'm going to go with Usman. Yeah, Usman, a couple of things. Usman never stops and he never really seems to slow down. Doesn't really seem to get tired. And he trains at altitude himself. He trains in Denver. So he's used to this kind of situation. I think he's the fighter that will be the least impacted by the cardio. Would you agree with that? Or is there somebody else you would pick?
No, it's Usman all day. He will look exhausted in between rounds. He will have his hands hanging on used to be Henry Hoof, but now it's Trevor Whitman or the cage. And I don't know what he does, man, between rounds. Like that GSP breathing, I don't know what the hell he does, but he recovers really quickly and he goes out there and he just puts a pace on people. And I think cardio for the most part is everybody gets tired. It's how quick you recover. And in addition to that, how much can you persevere mentally? Because sometimes, fatigue will make a coward of us all. And sometimes you could push beyond that barrier and certain fighters kind of crumble under the pressure. Like, not to hate on my boy Romanov, but I feel like putting him at elevation is almost a crime. Like you don't do that to Romanov because he's had cardio questions. It has looked better, but I'm still not sold on that cardio.
Yeah, same. So I have cardio questions about him, but most heavyweights don't look great in the third round of fights. That's just the reality of heavyweight fighting. Gordon has some of the best cardio on the card as well. He's somebody who never stops unless he gets put out. Otherwise he goes. And then Merab also. Like Merab's cardio is the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. I put Usman as number one just because he's fighting in a 5-round fight. So I put him number one. But I mean, nobody's better cardio than Merab either. Merab, Usman, two of the best gas tanks in all of the UFC. So a lot of guys with strong cardio in there that I don't think will be too impacted. We mentioned Santos is somebody that I think it could be an issue for. You know what's funny is I don't think Costa has great cardio.
I was just going to ask you that.
But here's the other thing though. I think that he doesn't give a shit. Like he looks tired all the time and he just fights through it. Like there are times in the fight against Yoel Romero, even the fight against Marvin Vettori, we look at it, you just be like, oh my God, Costa looks totally winded and gassed. And he just kind of fights through it and keeps going. So he's tough as shit. So I think that I don't know that his cardio is great, but I think that he has the mindset to where he doesn't let it stop him. Yeah.
I mean, the cardio questions kind of were erased when Costa fought Marvin Vettori in the 5-round atmosphere, because that was what I was thinking. I'm like, dude, Marvin Vettori is going to break him from just relentless cardio. And man, Costa had more success than I actually gave him credit for. So shout out to him. I don't know what the hell happened, but he definitely looked better. And now you're talking about a 3-round fight against Luke Rockhold, that I think he's meant for 3 rounds. Certain fighters are fine in 3-round atmospheres, certain fighters in 5-round, and like Romanov in a 5-round, I would be picking his opponent all day long. So yeah, you just got to pick the spots in certain matchups.
Yeah. And the other thing about Costa, we do have the ad national, why his cardio looks so good, because he can cut a pound for that fight. He showed up. That's and true. Yeah. So it was originally booked as a 185-pound fight. Costa shows up and he's like, I'm not going to make weight. So like, let's do 195. He's like, okay. He comes back the next day. He's like, yeah, I'm not making 195 either. And then eventually just like 205. He's like, sure, let's fight 205. He shows up. He's like 235. He's so much bigger than Marvin Vettori. And it's like, this is the equivalent of cheating, because Vettori was like 25 pounds lighter by the time the fight started. So I think that's the main reason that his cardio was also able to hold up to the later part of that fight. But
fair enough. Shout out to Vettori for actually, like, he doesn't get enough credit for doing that. Like, that's like a true company man. That is not many people will do that. That fight's getting scratched more times than not.
Yeah, the Orc King, as Izzy calls him, which I think is a hilarious nickname that he calls Marvin Vettori the Orc King. But that aside, let's talk about some of the other underdogs on the card, because there are a couple of ones that I think are safer, that have better win equity and have decent upside. So the ones that I put in that category, Jay Perrin, nearly a pick'em fight, and I think he has a little bit of wrestling upside going up against Alakang. So when it comes to Perrin, his loss against Mario Bautista, it wasn't the best matchup for him. He was a really big underdog, but he was able to land a couple of takedowns. We saw him land 4 takedowns on the Contender Series. So I think there's a little bit of wrestling upside for him if he does end up winning the fight. I don't think he's somebody who's going to finish Alakang and finish something like, 100 plus fantasy points. But I do think he's somebody in a win, probably scores at least decently because of the wrestling upside. And the other one is Daniel Lacerda. From the standpoint of this, he's kind of a first round or bust fighter, but it's also a fairly tightly lined fight. He's only a plus 145 underdog. And if he is to win, it's probably going to be first round, early second round. So in terms of safety, these are the 2 underdogs that I get the most exposure to overall, because they are fights that I think they have more realistic chance of winning than some of the other underdogs that we've talked about so far.
Okay. I like the 2 options, and this will kind of lead us to some more conversations, because I want to hear your take on this. Perrin, I think, is going to be the most overexposed underdog on the slate. He's everybody's darling this week. He has wrestling upside. He's trained with Marab for this camp. So you think that his takedown offense and defense will be on point, in addition to his already decent takedown upside in a matchup against Arichi Lang. So I like Jay Perrin. I think he's one of the safest on the slate. As far as like fights to prioritize, I'm getting to a ton of Daniel Lacerda and Victor Altamirano, because I could see this going one of 2 ways. Lacerda, extremely dangerous in round 1, tons of finishes, good takedowns, crazy unorthodox striking, but he's a gasser as well. And that's where I think like a comfort behind victory for Victor Altamirano is possible. So I view that fight as an optimal fight. I will slightly disagree, though, respectfully, of course, because I don't think that Lacerda is safe. And I know that everybody in chat is going to hate this.
I'm not saying he's safe. I'm saying that he's more likely to win than the fighters priced below him. There's more win equity there.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Okay. I agree with that. As far as like, if you wanted to just label safe underdog, I don't think any of them exist this week, but I think Wu Yanan, I know it's women's MMA and it's an ugly fight where a lot of people might try to get away from it in general. I like the fact that she's gone up against Jocelyn Edwards and Myra Bueno Silva. And I think that she has high volume striking. And I actually think the path to victory is putting Pudilova on her back and working towards a submission finish. And finishes are hard to come by for women's MMA, but I'm sprinkling that from a betting standpoint as well. I think that Wu Yanan could possibly be the shocker of the slate. So I have plenty of lineups with her just in case.
So I do pay attention to the betting market a lot.
Okay.
And so something of interest in this fight between Yanan and Pudilova.
Yep.
The bet tickets are fairly split. The last I looked, like Yanan was getting like 55% of the bets, Pudilova something like 45%, but 90% of the money was on Yanan, which means what? It means that of the bet tickets that are coming in, all of the bigger money tickets are on Yanan. So it does seem like there's a little bit of sharp money on her. Make of that what you will, but I do think that she's a little bit better of a play than Pudilova. It's hard to like either of them in tournaments just because I do think the upside is somewhat limited. But if I'm picking one side of the fight for tournaments, I would side with the Yanan side.
Okay, cool. And I think that Pudilova is probably the mystery of the card, right? Like fighter that's coming.
I'm fairly confident she's not a UFC level fighter. It's no mystery.
I don't think so either. I mean, she has looked to incorporate some takedowns, but like I think everybody's going to be scrolling past her. So I know that I am. And from the stare down yesterday, she seems to be extremely intense. I like it in Wu Yanan's favor even more now. I think Wu's going to be pissed off.
Yeah, could be. I think, if we're just to look at the ownership and say like, oh, she's going to be, ultimately, I think she comes in at like 9 to 12% owned. I think you can make a case for her as a contrarian play, but that's only if you're playing 150 lineups and trying to get it. Like if you're hand building a few lineups, not a fight I'd be targeting at all. I think it's the weakest fight on the card to target overall. We've got a super chat here from Doug Burdick. He's saying, besides Edwards, who is the best punt under 7.2 for cash, or least likely to get finished? Thanks, guys. None of them. So Edwards for cash for sure, right? Main event fight. He's got 5 rounds to work with. He's $7,100, opens up all kinds of salary. Oh, but you're talking about the other ones underneath it. There is no way that I'm playing the shit Figueiredo or Harry Hunsucker in cash games.
Figueiredo's a guy that I just keep doubting. He could be the guy we're not talking about today, but
not
like from a skill standpoint, oh no, definitely not a cash. But from just a possibly like winning the fight, man, I don't think he's good. I just don't think he's good. I mean, like he wasn't able to finish Jerome Rivera. Malcolm Gordon ragdolled him. He picked up a fluky submission win over Daniel Lacerda, who has horrible fight IQ and cardio. And Amir Albazi is a stud, just coming off a win against Jalga Shumaglov. I don't think we've seen the best of Amir Albazi, and I think the takedowns can be plentiful. If he stands up and strikes, he's an idiot because that's not his best path to victory. He needs to try to take Francisco Figueiredo down to takedown city. So Figgy is one of the lowest exposed fighters that I have a part of my crunch.
Yeah. So the way that I have started to calculate odds, which I was talking about that I was figuring for, I gave Figueiredo an 8% chance to land on the optimal lineup for this card, which was actually the lowest of any of the punt fighters for this slate. Like I think, at least per the way that I was figuring out projections, I had Hunsucker being more likely to be optimal than Figueiredo, just because in a win for Hunsucker, which is very, very unlikely, like the only path is a very quick first round finish. Beyond that, he probably loses. Whereas Figueiredo, I could just see this being a fairly shitty fight where weird shit happens. And maybe there's like, in our, like we talk about low level women's MMA fights, like 50% of them finish with an armbar from guard. Like that's what Figueiredo fights are as well. The bad Figueiredo fights, that is not Davis and Figueiredo. Francisco Figueiredo, like this is the equivalent of a low level women's MMA fight. A lot of his fights.
100%. You are right on the nose with that. And I would say that from a complete dart throw, Hunsucker has higher upside than Figueiredo. So I agree with you on that, because if he wins, it's via KO. We have seen Tyson Pedro get hit and hurt and rocked and finished. And perhaps Pedro doesn't feel comfortable in the cage, right? Especially if you have a guy who's just relentless and on top of you with combinations. Anybody can knock anybody out, especially when you're going up to light heavyweight or heavyweight divisions. And I think that Hunsucker possesses some power. So Hunsucker, not a bad dart throw today.
Yeah, that's it. Well, bad is relative. I like him more than Figueiredo, but to answer the super chat that we got from Doug before, I I wouldn't play anybody in cash games below Leon Edwards. I'm not playing Figueiredo or Hunsucker in cash. Edwards, who's the next cheapest guy I would play in cash games? Probably Perrin, to be honest. I don't like, I think there's such a low floor on all of the other cheap fighters. I would go, I haven't built, I'm not playing cash games this week, so I haven't built any, but I wouldn't feel good about any of these guys. And also your question was who's least likely to get finished. All of these cheap fighters other than Edwards are very likely to get finished.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I am with you. It's going to be an interesting slate, so we'll have to see.
By the way, Tyler, the one-stop shop is wrong, right? We don't have to leave now. We're good? All right, cool. All right, so let's talk about some of the other spots we haven't talked. What's that?
I'm down to keep going. Let's do it.
Yeah. I was going to say, I was looking at it. I was like, the baseball show, we've got some time, so we can keep going. And if the baseball shows go, screw those guys, right? I'm usually doing the baseball show. I'm calling the shots around here.
That's right, baby.
If you guys want NFL preseason projections, sign up using the promo code TUA. Because we've got Matt Gajewski. He knows so much about football. He's watching high school football tape. He's watching Pee-wee football tape. He knows everything there is to know. So if you want access to all our preseason projections because you don't know who's playing on each individual game, we've got you covered. Sign up using the promo code TUA, only $5, and you get access to all of our NFL DFS preseason projections. So the other spots that we haven't talked about yet, I'm curious, who have we not mentioned that stands out to you as being high upside fighters you want to target in tournaments, or any individual fights that are really high upside that we haven't talked about?
It is the AJ Fletcher Angelusa fight. I think that they are massively skilled. I really like both of them. We have seen Angelusa be a little hesitant at times. And I've honestly, I've heard a lot of great things about Angelusa from the Sanford camp, Killcliff, whatever they are. But I've also heard great things about AJ Fletcher. Now, the issue when you have super high level fighters going up against each other is that they can sometimes negate each other, neutralize each other in certain positions. Maybe Fletcher doesn't have that tremendous takedown upside that he normally would. I think Lusa can actually put Fletcher on his back as well. And they're both pretty talented in the striking department. It's a high paced fight that I'm getting to just because it's at that sweet spot for me. And like the Woodson Saldana fight is fine. I'm just projecting Woodson to kind of have one-way traffic most of the time, probably 70% of the time. And Saldana, if it hits the mat, will have the submission upside. So like those are two fights I'm getting exposure to, and I'm torn on both of them. Like as far as I wish AJ Fletcher was fighting somebody else because he would be my play of the week. I just really believe in his skills, but I also I picked Angelusa to beat Munir Lazez previously. So it's like, I hold both of these guys in quite high regard.
Everything he does, Fletcher, is like 150% effort.
Yes.
Which does worry me a little bit fighting at altitude because he hung in the fight, his UFC debut against Semmelsberger, which Semmelsberger's a fairly difficult debut fight, I think, for somebody entering for the first time. And not that he's, a ranked fighter or anything like that, but he's pretty well rounded. He can do a little bit of everything. And Fletcher looked great in the first round against him. Mm-hmm. And also what we like to see in DFS, really aggressive wrestling as well. Like we saw him take Semmelsberger down 3 times in that fight. So I thought he won the first round pretty handily. Semmelsberger won the second round. The third round ends up being competitive. Semmelsberger takes it over late, and I thought won the third round pretty clearly. But I do get a little concerned about him later in the round. Yep. I do think that of the two fighters in this spot, he's much higher upside just because I think if you look at the betting odds, he's like plus 250 to win inside the distance. And then on the other side, it's plus 400 for Lusa. Let me see if that's still the case. Yeah. And then also just the wrestling upside for Fletcher, even if it goes to decision. It's not a fight I'm prioritizing targeting just because I think there are other fights that are really likely to win inside the distance. But I think Fletcher is a fine large field tournament option.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the upside lies with Fletcher, but it's just I can't wait to watch the fight. I think it's a great fight to watch. Sometimes those fights that are super competitive don't result in tons of fantasy points because it's not one-way traffic. It's competitive throughout. So yeah, I'd like to hear your take on the Woodson Saldana fight because I think the takedown defense of Sean Woodson makes a lot of matchups difficult for his opponents. The volume's pretty strong and his length gives up, problems to everybody. And we've seen Saldana have cardio questions and issues in the past. So Like, yeah, he kicks a lot and he can strike really well. And he has the submission skill set to beat Sean Woodson, but how does he get it down there? Anything could happen, but I'm expecting Sean Woodson to roll here en route to a decision victory.
Yeah. So the issue I have with this fight is, like you said, I also think the most likely outcome is decision win. It's like minus 130, minus 125 to go to the judges' scorecards. And it's going to be a striking based fight.
Yep.
Like I don't think there's going to be very much wrestling involved. If it is, it's going to be from the Saldana side. I don't think he's the cardio to wrestle hard for 3 rounds. Sean Woodson is 82% takedown defense. So the most likely outcome is I think this fight takes place on the feet. And then what happens is, based on all the other fighters that have really high upside at the high end of the pricing tier, I'm kind of forced to look at like, okay, what are Woodson's odds of a first round KO? And it's like 8-1 or something like that the last I looked. And that's kind of his path to optimal. So I don't think this is a fight to target because I favor Woodson to win. And I don't think it's very likely to be a finish. And there's just so many fighters priced around him that I think have higher upside. So this is another fight that I'm not really all that heavy on.
Okay. I think that's fair. Poor cardio sometimes results in finishes. Yeah. So we could see the likes of a Woodson dig to the body as he did against Colin Anglin. That's what I would do if I was coaching him in this situation. But I would say that it's going to be competitive for a while. And in this weight class, a decision victory is probably going to happen.
Yeah, the thing that worries me is if the fight gets into the second round, based on all the other highly priced fighters today, I'm afraid that Woodson is dead if the fight hits the second round. Like, I kind of think he's first round finisher bust, at least in terms of the optimal lineup.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It's just like his volume for being such a big guy is pretty solid. So, I mean, I do agree with you. And like, yeah, he threw a ton against Kyle Bochniak, threw 251 and still only scored 82. So I think exactly what you're saying is fair. We always just don't know if, like, imagine if he gets some knockdowns en route to a high volume affair, then it's like, okay, now his score is going to be ballooned. So for the most part, I'm acting like it's going to the distance, but there is a tiny bit of my lineups where I'm accounting for a finish.
Yeah, he's going to probably be somebody who winds up in like 10% of my lineups or something like that. I'll be underweight to the field because I prefer Costa, I prefer Altamirano, I prefer Gordon, Romanov, Usman.
Yep.
Pedro's kind of hard for me to get up to, but I would play him over Woodson as well. Albazi, I mean, we haven't really talked about the Albazi side of the Albazi-Figueiredo fight, but I kind of question Albazi's upside at his salary as well. So, yeah, Woodson's going to be a guy that's tough for me to pay up for. Him and Albazi are overall my 2 least favorite high-priced fighters this weekend.
Okay.
Is there anybody we didn't talk about? Is Albazi making into many of your lineups? Because we talked about we don't think Figueiredo is particularly good, but yeah, another one in Albazi where I like his last fight, he fought against Jalga Zhumagulov, ends up winning decision, scores 78 fantasy points. His fight against Malcolm Gordon was a first round submission. He scored 107. Frankly, I don't think 107 at his price point is going to be enough for this week. So another guy I think is a pretty tough path to being optimal.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point where like women's MMA was hard for me to get to. Flyweight MMA was hard for me to get to when I used to construct lineups a lot. High activity, but low finish rate doesn't necessarily result in great fantasy points. And also urgency. Like, I would love Amir Albazi to look for 5+ takedowns here, because I do think that Figueiredo is going to defend some, work back to his feet. So he has some sneaky takedown upside, but it's that finishing upside I think you need at that 9,200 price tag, where like Romanov to finish much more likely, Tyson Pedro, Kamaru Usman, especially with the 5 rounds. So like Albazi is kind of in like my 18 to 20% range, just because I do think that he has the potential to score well. It just comes down to game plan and a little urgency. If he only attempts 3 takedowns, I don't think he pays off the price tag.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you there. I think there's going to be a lot of inactivity in that fight until something dumb like an armbar from guard ends up happening.
No, I hope not.
Super chat from Richie07G. Just getting settled in from vacation. Wanted to catch you guys before the show ended. Sure, you probably answered some of these already, but one, what fights do you want 100% exposure to? I don't have any fights I have 100% exposure to. Do you? Do you have any 100% fights?
Rockhold Costa.
Yeah, that's so my most rostered fights are Usman Edwards, just because I have so much exposure to Usman as of right now. Okay. And then, the fight I have the second most exposure to is that Costa Rockhold fight. But then also, I mean, there's just a lot of high upside fights to target. You know, Romanov Tybura, Gordon and Santos. We talked about that one. Those are the ones I would consider overall to be the highest priorities to target. And then favorite pay-up option and dog. All right. So I think this is a good way to finish the show.
Perfect.
Who are the three high price fighters you have the most exposure to? And then who are the three underdogs you have the most exposure to? And then that will do it. We got one more super chat. So we'll answer that super chat. Then it'll do it for us.
Okay. My top three high priced options. It's going to be Usman, Costa, and Romanov. And my three highest underdogs, Jay Perrin, Wu Yanan, and Jose Aldo.
All right. So for me on the high end, Usman, Costa, and I'm so close in exposure right now between Romanov and Gordon. So I'll just give you guys two there. I'll call that 3-1 and 3A, I guess. I know it doesn't make sense, 3-1, because it's technically 31, but whatever, right? Do we have to be perfect with the way we number stuff? No. All right. For my three underdogs, it is going to be Lacerda, Perrin, and Rockhold. Those are the three underdogs I'm getting the most.
Rockhold scares the hell out of me today, man. Because you already know.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. All right. One more super chat here. Sam Pierce. Do us a favor, guys. Like the video. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps us out a whole bunch. Really quick and easy to do. Costs you nothing. 5 seconds of your time other than that. All right. Sam Pierce. Pete, will the elevation be something when I'm building lineups, or do you think it won't play a role? And then also best DK captain. All right. So for the DK showdown mode. So how much will elevation matter for this card? And who's the best captain for DraftKings, the showdown mode?
I think it's going to affect some fighters, but I don't think it's like do or die. There are some times when you see fighters at extreme elevation, like Denver, Colorado, or something like that, or Mexico City, wherever they were at one time when we saw Kane experience some issues with his cardio. I'm adjusting my exposure and my projections slightly, but I'm not going crazy. And then best DK captain. Well, I think without even looking at the salaries, I'll probably just say Usman from a safety standpoint, safety and upside.
Yeah. So Usman would be number one overall for the captain. If I was going with a contrarian tournament play, I mean, anybody other than Usman. Usman's probably gonna be like 20-25% owned, if not more, in the captain spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's good chalk though, right? Like, because if he goes out there and he puts up 160, 180 points, like, yeah, you're with the masses, but I don't know how many fighters out there. I don't think anybody has the upside that he has on this entire slate.
Yeah. I mean, the other one I would say, if you're looking to save salary, go Luke Rockhold. If he wins, he's going to score big. You'd be on a really different lineup, and then you'd be able to fit in like all the other favorites. Like if you went with Costa, if you went with Rockhold in the captain spot, you got Usman in there. You would be able to get Tyson Pedro. You'd be able to get Romanov. So that would open up a lot in terms of salary. And if Rockhold wins, that's, a pretty clear path to being optimal. So if I'm going crazy contrarian with a cheap option, I would say Rockhold there also makes sense. Anybody you'd give as a contrarian captain to close us out here. I know I've tried to close the show 5 times, but like I said, we're taking over the channel today, Pete.
Yeah, I actually really like that contrarian call. And I'm not mad about it at all. It's an extremely different one. How about this one? I will say for a contrarian captain, Jose Aldo, just from a KO potential, but I am worried about his floor because I can see a stagnant decision win also.
All right. That is going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Everybody stuck around. I know we went a few minutes long, but we were hanging out. We're having a good time. We appreciate you guys very much. Good luck tonight. Enjoy the card. And also, we'll see you again. I'm not going to be here next week. Pete will be here with Jason next week. I'll be back eventually. The next time Jason's too cool and has to do a football show, I'll be back here with Pete. Other than that, later, guys. Thanks for watching.